The arrogant Superman is thinking nature is in our control, and not the other way around. Let them fight.
Don't act like a big shot, Tip. You just got the...
You have your fear, which might become reality. And you have Godzilla, which is reality.
Welcome back to the second episode of the Monster Movie Stompdown. It's the one time of the month for the Sludgecast podcast that we just get to rant and banter about a favorite giant monster film or monster film in general. The first episode, if you've listened to it, of course, we covered Godzilla, the original one, and then the American counterpart, Godzilla King of the Monsters. And this is something we're going to do once a month. We will be going through all 32 Godzilla films now. Of course, by the time we get there, it'll be up to 34 probably, in chronological order. But instead of doing that every month to keep it exciting and fun, we'll be going and doing it every other month and putting another monster movie in between. This month, we decided to actually start with the Gamera trilogy from the 90s, starting with Gamera Guardian Universe. So again, for this episode, not only do we have, of course, my father, Mark. Mark, you want to say hello?
Hey, hello.
We also have Ruben back with us. Ruben, say hello.
Hello. How you doing today?
Always good. I'm very, very glad, Ruben, that you are with us again. Had so much fun with you being on it the last time, and I know that you said you really enjoyed it, and I'm okay with you being a regular on this if you are.
Oh yeah, I love it. It's not often that I get to sit and talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is Japanese monster movie, kaiju films. Other than my son and my nephew, nobody else around here is interested in that. So it's fun for me. It's very much not even a chore. I love doing it.
Awesome. I mean, I love doing it. I can. Yeah. I'm a fanatic when it comes to this stuff. So, I mean, I knew going into Sludgecast that this is something I was going to be doing. And, of course, having Mark on it is great for me because he's who got me started in all this. And something that we actually tried doing, and we're doing actually tonight as we go about talking about Gamera the Guardian Universe is here at my house where we're recording this. We've got Gamera Guardian Universe actually playing on the TV in the background behind us. So we figured that was suiting for the cause. So, well, let's jump into it. Yeah, first, let's go ahead and talk about the character Gamera. Obviously, every one of us here has seen pretty much all the Gamera films. Gamera came out in 1965, and he became known as he really was. He was Godzilla's biggest rival, especially through the Showa era. You had all these other monster movies coming out because of how big Godzilla was. I mean, Korea jumped in the pool with Gary. Of course, you had Rodan and Mothra and Varan from Toho. You had I can't remember the name of the company. They released the X from Outer Space, X from Outer Space with the Godzilla. I never knew how to pronounce that. Then of course you had monster movies coming out everywhere. In England you got Gorgo, and you got Reptilicus is another one. The Giant Claw. I mean, everybody was dipping into the giant monster movie craze, but the biggest runner-up that Godzilla ever had, or rival, you should say, as far as another studio, was Gamera, again, who came out in 1965 from Daiei Studios. He ended up doing, from 1965 to 1980, 8 films. It was more by the third film the character went into becoming just a horror monster. I mean, that's what he was in the first one. He was a bad guy, just a giant prehistoric turtle awakened by an atomic bomb, much like Godzilla. He still kind of had the bad guy anti-hero role in Gamera vs. Barugan, the second film, which was a great film. Actually, that's one of my favorite of the Gamera movies. And it was by the third film, Gamera vs. Gyaos, where he fought the giant vampire bat, that he really kind of dove head first into the role of being known as the friend of all children. And it was from that point on through the rest of the films, Gamera vs. Guron and Virus and Jiger and Zigra, that a kid was the main character. It was all focused about him and these children that would go about saving the world, or another planet in the case of Gamera vs. Guron. from whoever the bad guy was, and it always seemed to be aliens trying to take over something. Then, of course, Daiei ended the series in 1980 with Gamera Super Monster, because right as they were going bankrupt. And Gamera Super Monster really wasn't a new film. It was just a literal amalgam of all stock footage from the previous films chopped together to try and just make some cash, because they were so bad in the hole. But Gamera was real big. He was popular, majorly popular with the kids, and we even see Godzilla took that change in the mid, in the 70s. Well, I guess maybe 65. Monster Zero kind of really was where it took the turn, I would think, where they were, where we started to rely on him as human characters as saving the day. Ghidorah really kind of started.
In other words, he wasn't an enemy of Japan anymore. All of a sudden, he was a defender.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he took the role too, but Gamera was always there. He was always the biggest rival at the box office and home video for Godzilla. Even over here in America, he made his way over here, and he was popular over here as well. Every Saturday, Monster Matinee. If it wasn't Godzilla, you were watching Gamera. Exactly. It was one of the two, and he took a major hiatus for quite a long time. Godzilla took a hiatus for almost 10 years between Terror of Godzilla and the Return of Godzilla in '84. Gamera went 15 years, without a movie, from 1980 to 1995, with the movie that we're fixing to get into, Gamera the Guardian Universe, which was the beginning of a trilogy of films that was done by Shusuke Kaneko, who, of course, for us Godzilla fans, he did GMK in the 2000s, which was, in my opinion, as far as the whole Millennium series was from Godzilla 2000, The Final Wars was the best. When he got to get his hands on it, there's some stuff we can get to on that one as far as his plans, but eventually we will down the line when we get to that movie. But Shusuke did a phenomenal job with it. But I really feel like with this movie, and this is where we'll go ahead and start getting into it, is he reset a standard for giant monster films when he did Gamera Guardian of the Universe. And we all literally, Mark was saying it before we started recording, watched this last night, all three of us, at different locations.
Yeah.
So enough of me. Really, we'll get into this. Let's start first off, because we did this last time with Godzilla, talking about the movie and how it came to precedence. Then we went on to talk about what we liked. Let's reverse this, and let's actually just start with what we liked about the movie, and then dive into the details of the film. Ruben, you want to go first? What did you like about this one?
What I liked about it, actually, is I liked the story itself. I found myself watching it and paying attention to all the details. I wanted to know more as I watched the movie. I just didn't want to see a Gamera fight the Gallos. I wanted to know, what was what was the purpose of Gamera? What would the Gallos do? I wanted to know more about the story. The story sucked me in, so that's what I liked about it. I liked that it left me wanting. I kept wanting more. As I watched it. And most monster movies, truthfully, I just want to see monsters fight it out. The story's always good, but I like to see the battles, which I enjoyed in these. These were pretty good battles. But what I liked about it is it had a story that kept me interested. And in other words, I wasn't bored waiting for the next battle, because something was going on. I liked the characters. They were real. I thought they were real good. So much that I started, as I was watching it, I would look them all up and say, okay, well, what else did these people do besides this one? I started looking up stuff about them and about the movie, and found out that it was actually very well received in Japan and won several awards for screenplay, for supporting actress, for I believe director was one of them. Let's see here, and I'll look that up to make sure that I'm correct on that.
It did. But, while you're looking that up, actually, it didn't not only do great in Japan. It did great over here. Because it had a budget of relatively $4.5 million US. It did a box office in Japan of $6 million, and even over here in Japan, in America, the film holds a 6.9 out of 10 rating on IMDb. It's got an audience score of 75%, with an average of 3.8 out of 5 on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's really good numbers for any monster movie.
Yeah. Exactly, because that was my next point, is it was so well received in Japan and even here. And usually monster movies of this type don't get that type of respect here in stateside for some reason. They're just not taken seriously or whatever, but this one was. And it kind of caught me by surprise because, this genre, it's not, I'm not going to say it's not popular, because it is. There's conventions all over the United States, and people are interested in anything kaiju now, even now more than ever with all these new films, with Legendary reviving it, and it's actually, I hear a lot more people talk about it now than I did in the past. But so, bottom line is that's what I like. What I liked about the movie was the story and the character build, not just. In other words, it was more than just a Gamera movie to me. It was, I was interested in what was going on with the characters.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, especially with the characters, I think, and I'll state this and we'll move on to what Mark liked about the movie, is where you got in the Godzilla Heisei films, or the Heisei era films of 84 to 95, you had a couple characters that may have made a return appearance. I think of the lieutenant from Godzilla vs. Biollante, who was also in Godzilla vs. Destroya. Can't think of his name right now off the top of my head. He was there for 2 films, but you really had just Megumi Odaka as Miki, the telepath who could communicate with Godzilla, and she did have a relationship with Godzilla, but it didn't seem like she really had much growth, through all the films. It's just she was there to tie them together, I felt like. Where
she was there to tie it together, but I don't know. I didn't really want to know more about her like I did with these characters.
Yeah, the character development wasn't good. Yeah. And a lot of these characters are in all 3 films, and there's so much development with them. You love these characters. And Mark, what about you? What did you think about what did you like about this movie?
Well, and I'm with Ruben. I thought the storyline was good, especially compared, in my opinion, to the first Gamera movies that came out. This movie really brought me in, and I thought, here's a character or a monster that's going to give Godzilla a run. When I first saw it, I enjoyed that the special effects I thought were better in this Gamera movie than it was in the previous ones, and so I wasn't aware that actually this came out to the theaters in America.
Yes,
and until tonight, and because I remember coming to me, it was straight to television. And when I first saw it, and was aware of Gamera that much, but I thought the storyline and what was going on in the story, I thought really, really brought you in. And it wasn't just that monster fight scene, then pause or be bored until the next monster fight scene. It stayed pretty good, and you can tell they put a bit more money into the production than prior movies.
Yeah, that definitely did. And I mean, and we'll jump into the story real quick before we go on to, well, no, I'll just go ahead and state what I like, because it'll move right into it, because we've all kind of stated it. The storyline was phenomenal. And I think that was the first thing that really reset the bar that Shusuke did with this film as far as a giant monster movie in comparison to what was coming out with Godzilla. I mean, Toho had more than just Godzilla movies coming out. I mean, you had movies like, Yamato Takeru came out in 94 with Space Godzilla. Great fantasy film. Ruben, have you seen that?
No, I have not.
Oh, man, you've got to watch that. Great movie. Oh, so good. Or it came out here in America and was called Orochi, the Eight-Headed Dragon. So, I mean, you had all these other movies coming out still, but there was... And it's kind of like, I mean, you guys had stated, there's just a vibe that comes with this, that people have got a stereotype expectation of these films, and Shusuke Kaneko really did. He just completely reset the bar in 95 with this, and I think the first step was the storyline. When we look back at the old Gamera films, again, it's just the same thing that we've seen in every other monster movie. Atomic bomb, prehistoric monster. Now we've got this big, radiated creature that started from the Godzilla films. And it was the same story over and over again. Gamera, Yongary, Pulgasari was a little different. But everyone was kind of the same thing. With this one, however, was very, very different, because in this movie, Gamera wasn't just some radiated prehistoric creature. They really brought in a fantasy element to it, relating to the ancient civilization of Atlantis, or in Japan, it's the continent of Mu, and with bringing in Gyaos as the main villain, because Gyaos was he wasn't as big as far as movies wise, because the Gamera films never were that big, but he was the Ghidra for Gamera. The Ghidra to Godzilla, Gyaos was that for Gamera. And so it was cool that he brought him in and gave a whole new storyline. And for those who haven't seen it, what really happens at the heart of this is, instead of just having these big monsters, they give them a major depth with the storyline. And having Gyaos being created by the Atlanteans, or the people of the continent of Mu, as their goal was to make the ultimate creature. Every creature's got multiple chromosomes. They talk about in the movie, humans have 23 base pairs, frogs have 12. The Gyaos have 1, because they were created perfect. And the problem that happened was that they turned on their creators and started to eat them. And that was the demise of that ancient civilization. And in a last-ditch effort to save themselves, they created Gamera to be their savior. And by the time they created Gamera, the Gyaos had went into hibernation. Civilization was done for. Gamera went into hibernation as well. Then we fast forward a couple thousand years, and here we are in 95. The Gyaos have awakened. So is Gamera. So the storyline is great. There's so much there to really pull from, and they carry that so well throughout the movie. It's like Mark, like you were just saying, it wasn't just a monster fight scene, and then we're just kind of waiting for something to happen. There's continuous progression in the film that keeps you into it, and like Ruben stated, and I agree with Ruben too. I love the storyline. The characters were phenomenal. They had a great cast, bringing in. For Asagi Kusanagi, the main character, is the girl who develops this telepathic connection with Gamera. She was played by Steven Seagal's daughter. Her name's Ayako Fujitani. She was great. This was her breakout role, and I don't know if it's because Dad got her the role, because he lived in I think Osaka or Okinawa. He lives in Japan, and if I'm not mistaken, her mom was like a model or something, and so it seemed fitting that she would go into show business somehow, and she did phenomenal. Her character gets this little stone that when anyone else touches it, nothing happens. When Asagi touches it, it starts to glow, because she forms this connection with Gamera, to the point to where when Gamera gets attacked and hurt, she gets hurt. There's this scene in the one fight scene. When the army first goes after Gamera in the mountains, and the Gyaos shows up and shoots Gamera in the arm and cuts his arm open, and her arm starts bleeding. That was such an interesting take too. Because you look at us Godzilla fans, we have Miki, Megumi Odaka's character, who's the telepath with Godzilla. There's no real development other than she can feel what Godzilla feels or thinks. They really went head over feet with Asagi's character, because he was her connection. Or she was his connection to mankind, and and they really developed that relationship, which I thought was awesome. You're sitting there looking after that last battle, and Gamera's into the ocean healing, and she's just laying in the bed asleep. Right. There's nothing physically wrong with her, but she just stays asleep. It's because he's sleeping. Yeah. He's, they're building that. So the development, it's unbelievable.
And she did a good job. From the first time she appears on screen, somehow you knew that she was going to be an important part of this movie. So you just knew somehow. It's just, I remember the first time I saw it. They walk into the little apartment and she's there. Let's see. She walks in. Oh, she invites that what's his name over to dinner, and she brings. And then somehow I just knew. I said, she's going to be an important part of this movie. And sure enough, she ends up being a very important part. And I thought she did a great job as far as acting throughout the movie. She always had a look on her face. Whatever Gamera was feeling, you could see it on her face.
Yeah.
So that she connected with him. You could, whatever, she didn't even have to say anything. You could see it on her face, and I thought that was excellent.
Well, and I think that's what when I was talking about those, instead of fight scene, then wait to the next fight scene, her character keeps you involved in the movie and keeps you involved in what's going on, and
exactly,
and pulls you right in there and keeps the movie exciting.
I can see that with multiple amounts of the characters. You look like you're talking about the gentleman she invites to dinner. That Yonemori, the gentleman who works on the plutonium ship at the beginning. He wants to see this thing through when they find Gamera and Gauss, and he's there right in the middle. He's a great character, because he's got this charisma about him. I felt like that he takes it, even though he has no responsibility in this whatsoever, he takes it on his shoulders to be the one that tries to do everything he can to save everybody.
And that's because the incident really resulted in nothing. There was no plutonium leak. There was, in other words, nothing happened, but he says that in the movie, even though nothing happened and there was no, spill, I guess you'd call it, or he still felt like, what if it would have happened? I would have been responsible. And he got it. Yeah. And so you're right. I agree with you 100%. And we can go on and on. All these characters appear and they all did such a great job, and you want us to know what's going to happen next, down to where, there's one scene that sticks to me, but it wasn't him. It was when they go out and get the scientist, Mayumi. Am I saying it right? Am I pronouncing it right? I believe I am. And she says she's done, and then
Doctor.
That guy tells, and
bird scientist.
And then she goes, I just lost one of my colleagues, and you have to give me space. And then that guy just goes into, oh, please forgive me. And he bows and he goes, please forgive me. I just want to save lives. That scene always stuck with me because it felt so real to me. Like, man, this guy really, I felt like, man, he's really sorry. He caught himself and said he was sorry and did the Japanese custom of bowing and asking for forgiveness. And that scene stuck with me as very well acted.
Oh yeah, and even you were talking about Dr. Nagamine, or is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
Her character's phenomenal too. From the get-go, she's kind of thrown in this situation because her mentor is eaten by the Gauss at the very beginning of the film.
Yes.
And the whole cabinet. The government relies on her all of a sudden to solve their problem. How are they going to work this? And
I love the way she puts the government official in his place when he tries to. I just love that. I'm like, she tries to not show up on her, and she pretty much puts him in his place, and he has no choice but to listen.
Oh yeah, which is great because that's so strong for a female role, especially in that culture. Because
exactly.
There's a major male to female dominance as far as how things are handled respectfully, especially in a role where you're dealing with government members versus a lady who's a scientist, and that really showed the strength that character's got, that she portrayed, and she did so good at that.
Yeah, I was, because I thought the same thing, because the Japanese culture is that of the women are subordinates pretty much, and in this movie, right away, she took charge. I remember one scene, he says, well, you're awful young. But she took charge. Like and pretty much put him in his place whenever he got out of hand, she'd reel him back in and tell them, hey, you're the one that came to me. So you have to listen. And he submitted, for which I thought was kind of surprising, because I always thought that culture has always been more vice versa. So that too, for even in 1995, that was ahead of its time as far as I'm concerned, as far as Japanese films, as far as a woman having a strong role where the man listens to her.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I mean, every character's memorable. I mean, one character that we were talking about before we started this, and I just got to bring up, definitely has to be the Inspector, Osako, who's played by Yakijiro Hotaru. He's kind of the comedic relief a little bit in this movie. I mean, my wife, when she was sitting here watching it, she couldn't stop laughing at him. I mean, the moment when they have to go meet that cabinet minister for the first time, and he's just standing there like all scared and just stoned. I mean,
he's got that look on his face, like,
he
oh my God.
does. He's like a big chicken throughout the whole film, and I mean, you can't help but laugh at him. So he's a very likable character, and what I loved about his character is they brought him back for all three films. He's in the second Gamera of this trilogy, Attack or Advent of Legion, and he's also in the third film, Revenge of Iris. But what I loved about his character, and we'll talk about as we do the next two of these films, reviewing them, is his slow progression downhill. He's an inspector in this one, and has a high job as far as being an inspector and a detective. By the next film, he's went down to just a part-time security guard because of what's happened in this movie. To the third film, he's a alcoholic homeless man, which is just great to see, because in each film he's always the first guy to see the monster. He's the first one to see Gauss, and then in Advent of Legion he's the first one to see the Legion insect, and then in Revenge of Iris he sees the Gauss again for the first time, and it's just, his slow digression is hilarious. So he's a good comedic effect. Every character, I mean, there is not many, there's honestly, I can't think of any giant monster film, including the Godzilla film, other than the original Godzilla, where every character is this good that you love, and they stick with you, and you're interested in that character, because most of the time, I mean, you're just usually looking for a giant monster fight, and that's what you want to see. On those, and
absolutely,
and especially when it comes to the giant monster fights. In this one, again, we stated Kaneko really reset the bar with the giant monster genre in general with this movie, as far as the storyline. The cast that he got and the characters were so good, but when it comes to the actual monsters themselves, the fight sequences and the special effects, Toho just couldn't touch this, I don't think. I mean, Destroy Us, Godzilla's Destroy Us came out the same year, The Death of Godzilla. I mean, we love that film. It's a Godzilla film, and it's The Death of Godzilla, and it's so good, but and Godzilla looks great in it. Destroya looks awesome, but those special effects just don't even come close, in my opinion, to touching the special effects in these movies. I mean, Gamera looked unbelievable. I mean, that suit was phenomenal. The way that it can move its head, the eye movement. I was talking to my wife about it. Is Godzilla never could have, he never could emote a facial expression, I feel like. I mean, there was just a look. You couldn't really say, oh, he's sad or he's mad or whatever. The special effects in this, Gamera, you could. They were able to actually make him emote very well, which just was unheard of and never seen in a giant monster film at that time.
Well, I think that in this movie, I mean, his head and neck, they had so much more control over it, making it more realistic than in previous time, where it was a shaken, like on a string type deal. And I think that, I'm sitting here watching him, and I'm watching him fly, and with everything going on in the background. If you don't know, we've got it on the screen here, and it's just he's more realistic, lifelike, and you can see kind of what's in his eyes, what's going on. I think they just did a whole lot better job with this Gamera.
Oh, I mean, of course,
it's like an action figure. The suit has more points of articulation,
right?
And of course, with any action figure, the more points of articulation, the better an action figure is. And I think they were onto something with that. They said, you know what, if we do this will make the movie better, and they were absolutely right. and so when Gamera's hit, you see it. It's not just a roar. Godzilla gets hit, you might have some blood, and he roars, but there's not really a painful expression in his face as there was in Gamera.
Oh yeah, well I remember watching it last night. The major fight scene at the end when Gauss comes down at Gamera and slams his feet into him. That first impact and knocks Gamera back, and you see it on his face. My son caught that before he was going to bed at the time. Saw that, and he was just even like, "Whoa, Dad!" Like he knocked him down. And I was like, it looked forceful, I mean, even and the camera angles just made everything look perfect, and I think they did a great job because the special effects. Yeah, I mean, one, you've got Shinji Higuchi stepped on board for this, and for those who don't know who that guy is, if you're listening to this and you're a fan of Giant Monster films of any kind, you know the name because he's the special effects director for Attack on Titan, the live action films, and then of course he was the special effects director for Shin Godzilla, and the dude is phenomenal, I think, when it comes to special effects, and he really set a new precedence with this Gamera film. And as the special effects director, I think he really knew where his limitations were and knew how to work with the camera. I mean, obviously there are some things that still wouldn't look perfect, but he knew how to pull it off right by camera angles. I go to the first thing I think of is when Gauss attacks Tokyo and gets that subway cart or train with the people in it. He could have shot a bit different ways, and I don't think it would have looked as good if it was a side angle shot of Gauss tearing apart the train and pulling the people out. He didn't do that. Instead, it's shot from a camera angle inside the train, looking up, and you see, that I thought was really genius because that was the best way to pull it off. And there's a lot of close angle shots like that. And so I think he not only knew how to make these suits so much far superior than what we had seen at the time, he knew how to put them on camera the right way, to really accentuate them. And
you're right. That reminds me on that train. He attacks it, and of course that couple with the Walkman, they were coming back from some game or something. And the guy had a Walkman on. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
And he was talking to the girl, and he was like, "Oh, there's a giant monster attacking. That would be cool." Fast forward, Gauss attacks the train.
That's
opens
right.
It up. Yeah, and they end up dying, and all they show is his Walkman.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the aftermath, yeah.
Which, I mean, and they didn't do stuff like that in any other Giant Monster movie, you know what I mean? Like, that's what the Gauss, they feed on us. And that first sequence when he does finally go into the train and you see him come up and he's chomping his mouth, they did so good on the special effects because, I mean, you see the Walkman part, but then if you actually pay attention, you can see the torn shirt of the guy in the Gauss's mouth.
Oh, okay.
I didn't catch that one.
Oh, man, it's awesome. But, I mean, they even, not just the visuals, the sound effects, because, I mean, you hear him chomping, and you can hear bone crack.
Yeah, you hear the bone cracking. Yeah.
And, I mean, that's like, my wife was, the scene where Gauss starts to grow right then and, there, the sound effects of not only just him eating, but you can hear, if you pay attention, the like almost like what would be the muscles growing or stretching. Just, I mean, it was. She's like, that sounds so gross. I'm like, they did so good. They really did their best to pay attention to detail. I thought in this film. I mean, even the miniature sets of the cityscape. Oh man, so much better than anything in a Godzilla film.
And one thing, I don't know if you caught this, and maybe this is common knowledge, but I kind of laughed out loud when I saw it. The first time Gamera shows up, he's heading to the Tokyo Dome. He comes up, and this is the only time I saw it. He comes up in the refinery, and it's a Shell Corporation. Did you notice that?
No, I did not notice that.
And it's the Shell Corporation. I thought, I wonder if that's a shout out because he's a turtle.
I might go back and look at that now. Are we at that scene in the movie?
Yeah, it just played.
Oh man, that's going to be when I go like, look.
And I said, I wonder because he ends up at another refinery, and of course, the markings aren't. There's no markings on that one other than numbers. But this one, has that big old shell logo right on one of the tanks.
We'll have to go back and
I
look
was like,
now.
hey, I wonder if that's on purpose or
Well,
not, you know?
And talking about
You
that
know?
scene, that makes me think of too, and I can't help but just, I mean, the special effects. I mean, if I had to pick something in general that is my favorite about this film, it is the special effects. And the attention to detail when he's comes out of the harbor there and the port, and he's walking through the city going to the baseball stadium.
Yeah.
When he walks through that building, the construction building that's not been built yet, but it's just all the steel framing.
Yeah.
When he hits that, I mean, and if you listen, you hear this. They put in the special effects for the steel falling and hitting each other, and you didn't get that in Toho films. You know what I mean? Like you could hear it, and it's just they went so above and beyond with that. It really just blew my mind.
Yeah, it's the attention to detail, especially with the sound effects, especially like you said. With the bone crunching, the steel crunch. When he rips open the subway train, or not subway, the rail train, I guess you call it, because it wasn't a subway; it was an underground. All those sound effects helped with the, you escaping your reality and you're in the film.
Oh yeah,
it was all those little attention to details, which might be minor to some people. To me, made the film. It made the movie so much more realistic. Even though you're looking at a monster, but still, that attention to detail is what made the film also.
Yeah, I think they did phenomenal with it. I mean, and we all, I watched it on the Blu-ray last night, and
yes,
so many movies prior to that era, or even in that era, when you watch them on Blu-ray, the special effects just tend to not stand up. And
yes,
going back,
exactly.
and there's scenes where I can go, okay, like this scene where he's flying, because while the flying scenes are great, you can still kind of tell on Blu-ray what was matted CG, but you didn't see any wire work, which I thought was a testament, because it's Blu-ray. I should be able to see wire work. Saw none throughout the whole film. Now, obviously, with him flying, they definitely started to master that over the next two films, but I don't think it was still bad in this film by any means. But those were probably the weakest of the special effects, and even those being the weakest on Blu-ray, they looked great. So good. I mean, better than... I mean, those flying sequences look better than, Ghidorah or Batra or Mothra flying in the Godzilla movies, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't watch the Blu-ray. One of the things I want to say that is the only part that I actually even noticed anything is when they escape in the Tokyo Dome. Oh, actually, when they land in the Tokyo Dome and they start eating on the sides of beef, and they're kind of just hovering around it. There, you can kind of tell, but otherwise,
right.
Film, no way. and I even looked at it, and I was trying to figure out how they did that. Whether it almost looked like stop motion, but I'm not sure. I mean, if you get to that part in the movie that I'm talking about, you'll see what I'm talking about. Because they're hovering over the beef, and they're kind of picking at it, and it almost looked like stop motion. But I said, I don't think they would have used stop motion. So
I know on the scenes where you actually see them biting at the beef, those were hand puppets that they used.
Oh, okay, yes, the close-ups.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of puppetry.
This was a wide shot. It was them flying over.
Oh, okay, I know exactly what shot you're talking about. Yeah. It does kind of look like stop motion.
It kind of looks like stop motion to me. I don't know if it is or not. I couldn't find anything online that told me it was. And really, that was the only part of the movie, and it didn't even bother me much.
No, because it still looks great today.
It still looks great,
And thinking about that baseball scene, me and Mark were talking about this earlier because I noticed it watching it. Because it's probably been, now Gamera 2, I watch probably at least once a month. I mean, that's arguably it's in my top 3 greatest giant monster films of all time. I absolutely love Gamera 2. But, the Guardian Universe, it's probably been a few months since I've watched this film, maybe close to a year since I've watched this one. And going back and watching it, I didn't notice it till watching this time. The amount of green, and in one particular shade of green, and it's that CG screen green. If you can recall, when they go to search for Gamera, the atoll, because they don't know what he is yet, everybody on the ship is wearing this CG screen color green jacket. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Uh-huh.
Okay, they're all like, those jumpsuit jackets or whatever, and they're all that same color green. Well, then you go to the dome, and that green is everywhere. Like, they got that truck that's got that box thing that's got the guys in it as they're setting everything up. The box they're in, same color green. The truck, same color green. The floor, same color green. Like, it's everywhere. And me and my wife were laughing about last night at that scene. It's like that green is all over the place. Well, then, Gamera attacks the dome, the gals fly out, and then they go back after everything happens, and they're looking at Nagamine and Yonemori, the guy, are looking at the cages and how they're kind of where the gals cut out of them, how smooth they are. Well, I paid attention to the cones, the safety cones. They're the same color green. That green is throughout the entire film, and I just kept going. Somebody loves green on that crew because they're like,
some art director.
So now the next time you watch it, you're going to go, man, there is a lot of that green in here.
And then obviously when Gamera bleeds, he bleeds green.
The same color green.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Yep, Gamera's blood. And I was going to tell you, Gamera's blood is that lime green color.
And I thought that was interesting with him. And then they've always been that way, I think, with the Gamera films. Even though, even the films where he was a friend of children, and not many monster movies would do this as far as this genre. They didn't care to show blood, which you didn't get often in the Godzilla film. In the Showa era, we didn't get it till 1972 with Godzilla vs. Gigan.
Right.
Then it skips Godzilla vs. Megalon and nothing in Godzilla vs. Hedorah, but Godzilla vs. Megagodzilla, we got plenty in that one. You really don't get to see much, but in this one, and what I think is what I like about that so much, showing how Gamera bleeds or the Gyaos bleed, is the fact that it makes you feel like they're not this unstoppable beast, that there is a mortality to them, which makes them more believable to me. If you know what I mean? Yeah. Where Godzilla, it's immortal. There's nothing that can be done, which puts it in a very majestic category. But with Gamera, it makes me want to root for him more. Like when Godzilla's fighting a monster, you're like, he's going to win. You can't stop him. He's Godzilla. With Gamera, he can be hurt, so you're really rooting for him. And when he does come out victorious, you feel victorious with him. Does that make sense?
Right, exactly.
And so I think that makes him so much more of a hero character to me that I liked with these films.
Absolutely, I agree. And also being connected to the young lady, you're rooting for him because whatever happens to him happens to her. Yeah. So you almost you don't want anything bad to happen because, in fact, the first time I watched it, in that final battle, of course he gets thrown. It's in that refinery and he catches fire. And my first thought was, oh no, Gamera's going to catch fire. Oh no, I hope that she doesn't get burned. He was thrown into the fire, and I immediately thought about her burning, feeling all the burning sensation. Of course, it didn't happen in the movie for some reason. There was a little disconnect there. He was injured; he would feel it, but apparently, if he's on fire, that doesn't count.
Right? Yeah,
yeah.
And I thought that the choreography with the fights were great. Oh
yes, they were. Yeah.
When I was, when Gavin, my son, was watching it with me, and Gamera takes off towards space, towards the stratosphere, and Gyaos follows. Gavin's like, "What's he doing, Dad?" I said, "Watch, he's got a plan." And he does it for the sole purpose of, as soon as Gyaos gets to him, he turns, bites his leg, and just drops because he's got the plan. In order to stop him, I want to slam him into the ground. It backfires when Gyaos cuts his leg off and Gamera hits into that refinery. But there's that level of intelligence that Gamera's got, and I think a lot of it helps too with being attached to Sagi's character. That again you don't get with Godzilla or some of those other characters. He was just a much more complex monster this time around. I really felt like.
And I too, I was kind of torn. Is she helping him? Because actually, it turns around when she holds hands with her dad, and then all of a sudden, Gamera makes that comeback, where it looks like he's about to lose, and of course, So I was always wondered. I said, I wonder if he's drawing. He's connected to her. I wonder if he's also drawing some of that intelligence. Not that he's a dumb animal or anything, because obviously he was created by man. So I'm sure that they gave him some kind of intelligence. But I always wondered about that every time I watched a movie. I said, I wonder if like that would be a question I would ask on a Comic-Con panel. You know, hey,
right.
You know, did he get intelligent? Is he intelligent on his own, or does he require? Because those little metal things were all over his back. I guess his shell, really. You know, so.
You know, and I thought about that too. You know, when you watch this film and you see all those beads, and this is
right.
Opening this door here was we're going to kind of jump into a little bit of what happens in the third film, but there was so many of them, and my first initial thought is why so many? They make so many for Gamera when I first saw this, so that there was hopes of them finding a priestess or character that becomes a Asagi for him to connect to. Did they make that many just for that purpose, to try and find someone to connect him to it? But then when you go and you see the third Gamera film and they find that entire graveyard of past Gameras, I then go back and wonder, did those belong to those Gameras as well? Did each one have only one, and there was someone that they were designed and connected to be their human counterpart? And actually, and I want to get into to talk about what was our most standout scene. But let's actually talk about the character a little bit more there as far as the development, because something else that happened in this trilogy that doesn't happen in any other monster movie is every bit as much as the human characters develop, Gamera himself develops through all three films. And I don't, I've read reviews about the films, and I watched, YouTube reviews about it, but I've never really heard anybody talk about Gamera and the development that character goes through. And we'll, each film as we review them, we'll go a little more in depth into this. But if you look at Gamera in Guardian of the Universe, he is this savior, this hero. He's got this connection with Asagi. Even his physical look is very heroic. When you get to the next film, he looks a little edgier, a little more veteran, and he fights that way too when he fights up against the Legion. But you see a change start to happen with Gamera, and all of a sudden that movie too, Asagi loses her connection with Gamera in that film. And so you see him start to change as a character and develop. He's willing to go above and beyond and sacrifice a little bit more because of his connection. But then when he loses that connection, things start to change even more for him. So by the time he appears in the third film, even physically, now he looks almost evil. And he has no care or worry about people. You look in the first film, in Gamera Guardian Universe, the scene where Nagamine and Yonomori are running across that bridge with that little boy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he sticks his hand out to save them when Gao shoots
to shield him.
Yeah. So, very heroic. You don't see him do that in the second film, but you see him make the sacrifices needed to save the planet when it comes to the pod shooting. And again, we'll go more into that as we...
he maybe even goes progressively darker as the movies
go
on.
And as you look, that connection with Asagi dissipates too.
Right.
So the further he gets away from that connection, the darker he gets.
Yes.
And he's still that hero, but by the third film, he doesn't really... If people get killed... I can't help but think of the scene in the third one where, he fights the Gauss in the Shinjuku district, and he blows that fireball right through that window of that restaurant, and those people just get torched. To do what it takes to save the planet, not so much people. Even though there's that scene at the end of the third one where he knows who Asagi is. He will always know who she is. But you see over these three films him develop as a character. He's not the same thing. He does change, and he gains experience, and he has a mentality and a reason for doing what he does. And I think that's an amazing thing that Kaneko did with the character, because what do you guys think about that? Do you see that?
I think exactly, yeah. And the more he ages or more it goes on, and he pulls away, and you see him doing what he has to do. and human lives don't as much matter as they do, say, in the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. Of course, my theory is more as he loses that human connection. I'm not gonna say he doesn't care anymore, but I guess the best way to put it is that humanity connection is not there anymore. So now he's more of a monster than he is. Than he has that I guess human spark maybe.
Yep, I think it's almost like a foreshadowing of Legendary's Godzilla, in my opinion. When you look at, he's what Godzilla in the Legendary films is nature's equalizer. That's what he does,
right.
And it's almost kind of like that's what Gamera turns into by the third film. Is he's the Earth's equalizer? That's what he's there to do. When something comes up, he's there to fix it. And losing that human connection, it's almost like we're not as important,
right,
to protect.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to put it, but it was kind of like, okay, as he loses that human connection, I'm not going to say he doesn't care anymore, but he doesn't have that
priority, maybe.
That priority. There you go. There's the word. I would say he doesn't have that priority, or because he's a monster. Hey, the building's in the way.
It's got to go.
I got to get over there.
Well,
so
and I think
go right through it.
I think with this first movie, he starts out. They treat him as a monster. They're trying to kill him. All the humans are. They're they're
trying
shooting
to
him
save
down,
the gals.
and so they're almost working against him, and yet he doesn't attack them. He doesn't do those things. He shields them on the bridge, and I think when he loses that human connection, that's when things really, really change.
Yeah. Well, even look at I don't want to jump into the next two movies as much, but you can't help it. With the character development, you don't really see the change for the humans until the second film, where the one general says, "Stop what we're doing. We give all support to Gamera," when he's fighting the big Legion, and you really you'll see that happen. And even, there's that look at the end of that film, where he looks at the army. It's almost like there's a moment, it's like, hey, we came together to do something. And it's really, to me, the whole trilogy is just Godzilla, the original one, is going to be the greatest monster movie of all time. This series of films is, and starting especially with Gamera Guardian Universe, because it's so pivotal and changed that genre forever, in my opinion. It's up there with the original Godzilla. For completely different reasons, but it's up there as far as it's going to be that memorable of a movie.
And truthfully, I had seen some of the original Gamera movies when I was a kid, and I had them on, and it was my son. He said, "Dad, have you seen the new Gamera movies?" And I'm like, "No." And he goes, "Oh, they're real good." And we were just at half price one day, and he found a DVD. And he goes, "Have you seen these?" And I said, "Nah." He goes, "I've seen them online. They're really good." And we purchased it. And that was my first time I saw Gamera. I thought I was going to run into something like the old movies, and then I saw it. I'm like, "Yeah, this is really good." He was right.
Way to go, RJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. RJ's the one that really told me. And, he has a real good eye for that. So,
well, I remember.
The only thing go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No, I just, he had a real good eye for that. So I'm like, man, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even have given this new trilogy a chance, because, the older movies, I'd seen them and they were all right, but nothing close to this.
Yeah, I own all the originals, but honestly, I only really watched the first three. If I'm going back and watching the old ones, the original Gamera, and then Gamera vs. Bruggen, the Gamera vs. Gauss, and then from there on out, I own them, but there's no draw to watch those movies. It's more I own it because I want to own it as a Gamera, fan. But I remember when these came out in the 90s, Mark, actually for a little while, because I went on such a rant for the second one, especially, do you remember this, Mark? You would call me Benedict Arnold.
Yes. Yeah. Going against Godzilla, you can't do that.
He was like, "You're such a Benedict" all the time. But when you sit down and watch them, though, it's just like, You can't. I mean, Godzilla's always going to be better. He's the bigger, better monster. But I mean, when you look at him as films, I think these '90s films, especially with Gamera Guardian Universe, they were just, other than just the character and who the character means, because Godzilla's in our hearts so much, just as a film, they were just superior to the '90s films. I think all across the board, character development, storyline, special effects. I mean, they really went above and beyond to make it interesting, believable. It's one of those ones where, I mean, I can go back and watch Gamera Guardian Universe any time, and then just I'll watch it the whole time. It's not one of those ones where I'll just throw on the background and, you know, maybe walk away and do something, then come back and finish it. I mean, I'm watching it start to finish, and I don't want to miss any of it because it's that good. It's that good of a movie. So I mean, talking about how good it is, and as we wrap this thing up, you know, let's just throw out real quick what scene in the movie stuck out to you the most, Mark?
Well, it's hard because I've been sitting here watching it while you guys are talking, and I'm losing myself over there. I think that I didn't have one particular great scene as much as I did like the progression of the movie and Gamera getting knocked down, back up, to the point where he became almost unstoppable towards the end, and the Gauss didn't have a chance. And so I think overall, I was pretty even across the board, you might say.
Right.
It was just I enjoyed the movie from start to finish, and never got bored with it, and I'd watch it over and over.
Yeah, it's so Benedict.
Yeah, thanks. That's the way that works.
Oh, you're part of the Rebel Alliance and the traitors.
But if you go to the house, Godzilla is in the machine, and I just watched it since I've watched.
Wait, which one? Which one?
The new one.
2014.
Yeah,
it's gonna be good. What about Ruben? What about you? Was there anything in particular, scene that really just stuck out above the rest?
Boy, that's a tough question because, you know, I enjoyed the whole movie, but I would say that the scene that kind of stuck out to me that actually made me really enjoy the movie is when Gamera is heading back out to sea and the army's attacking him. The jets are shooting their bombs at him, and he's just screaming in pain, and all that was so, I guess emotional would be the word. You know, I felt bad for him.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I really felt bad for him. I said, man, they're turned on him. He's trying to help out, and you guys are trying your best to injure him and take him out. And he's screaming and writhing in pain as all these missiles are hitting him, and they're just trying everything. Finally, he gets away from them, and they're still trying to, you know, he finally flies away. But that part kind of got, I mean, I enjoyed everything about it, but for some reason that stuck out to me when he was being attacked.
Well, it really makes you not like the human characters at that point. You know,
exactly. I'm sitting there just with disdain for that Minister of Defense or wherever that guy is, that the one that decides, oh, we need to capture him, the Gauss, and he goes, we need to kill Gamera because he knocked down a building or whatever, you know. And I was like, this guy just needs to be, you know,
eaten by the Gauss. That's how I felt like.
Exactly.
he needs to be taken out.
Yeah, you know, and so that's what stuck out to me, which is kind of funny because you would think, well, the final battle, because there was such a great battle.
Oh,
you
yeah.
You alluded to it, the choreograph. But actually, when I think about the movie, I always go back to that. I think, man, you know, because his screams were he was in pain, he was being attacked, and he's vulnerable, and I thought that was well choreographed too. The way they came at him and the way they filmed it, and that's the part that sticks out to me.
I think for me, there was always one scene for this film that really just, and even like last night watching it, I'm like, you know, I think at the time Sarah was asking me some questions. I'm like, you gotta be quiet for a minute because this is about to happen. Is literally his first appearance out of the harbor when the helicopter's flying and they're following the Gauss, and he comes up out of that water and just takes that hand and just just annihilates that one gal, smacks him right into the refinery stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That scene to me was just like, I mean, it's like, this ain't your daddy's Gamera. You know what I mean? It lets you know right then and there, this isn't the Gamera you're used to or saw before. This is a whole new ball game. I thought that was just I'm always about the entrance of the monster. You know what I mean? You go back to, I mean, my favorite Godzilla film, 1985 or 84, that first time he shows up there at that nuclear reactor, man, and the camera pans up. That's a memorable scene of like, oh, you know what I mean? I felt the same way with Gamera here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's you know, something you would put on a T-shirt.
Yeah, it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was so good. So, well, all right, guys. Well, we're going to wrap this one up. So, again, thank you guys so much for listening as we rant about Gamera Guardian the Universe. Phenomenal trilogy of films. We will continue this one, this trilogy here. What we'll actually be doing on the next monster movie, Stompdown, is we'll continue on with the Godzilla films. With the second Godzilla movie, Godzilla Raids Again, we will talk a little bit about the American version. It wasn't so much edited as far as the footage of the movie, but a lot of the dubbing was done a little different. So we will talk a little bit about the American version, but primarily about the Japanese version, Godzilla Raids Again, the next film, and then we'll follow that up with the second Gamera trilogy film, Gamera 2 Advent of Legion. Thank you guys so much. Hope you all enjoy this.
That's gonna be good.
That's the best of the trilogy. Like, I mean, I think it goes without saying because so many people have when it comes to the third Gamera film. I mean, it won so many more awards than any other monster movies ever won, and I really think that, I mean, Godzilla's a staple, but Gamera 3 could arguably be the greatest actually film.
3 or 2?
3.
3. Okay.
Monster movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, every moment of that movie. But Gamera 2, I mean, that's up there for me, man. I watched that movie that's one of those ones where my wife will make fun of me because if we put Godzilla 1985 on, I'll say the dialogue before it happens because I know it so much. And with Gamera 2, it's the same way. Now, I don't say the Japanese. I'll say what they're saying in English. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that's what she's fixing to say. Or that's what that guy's fixing to say. Because I know that movie so well just from watching it so much as a kid, even to the day. I mean, that's one of my go-to films to always watch. So thank you again for joining us. Join us next month for Godzilla Raids Again. The month prior to that, we will continue on Gamera 2 Advent of the Legion. Thank you so much. Mark, Ruben, you want to say your goodbyes?
I'll jump in when you get a chance. If you get a chance, watch this trilogy. It's really, really good. And everybody have a good evening.
And I really had fun with this. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Again, thank you guys. This is Sludge signing out.
Let them fight.